In areas of low magnesium in the soil and or the water, rates of sudden cardiac death in those populations was much higher than the rest of the surrounding areas. I thought and of course, cardiovascular disease and death from cardiovascular disease being the number one killer in our nation and growing since then to the world, I was, of course, fascinated. So I had been taught about cholesterol, and I had been taught about high blood pressure and all those things that go along with cardiovascular disease. And here was this mineral, my field, and I had learned nothing about it. That's what sparked my interest in magnesium, and I started.
Welcome to the Fredrickson Health Show, highlighting expert practitioners from health, fitness, injury prevention, functional medicine, and integrative medicine. If you are into upgrading and optimizing your health, this podcast is for you. This podcast is for educational purposes only and not intended to be used as personalized medical advice. And now, here is your host, Dr. Robert Fredrickson.
I'm so honored, so thankful to have Dr. Andrea Rosanoff. She is a leading magnesium expert, a pioneer, if you will, in research for magnesium. I'm going to read her bio because it is so fascinating, and we are going to learn a lot today on magnesium, the reasons why we need magnesium, the importance of magnesium, why it's not tested the way it should, why our food supply is depleted, and so much more. So let's go over the bio really quick while we introduce Dr. Rosanoff. Dr. Rosanoff is a creator and director for the Center for Magnesium Research and Education. This is based out of Hawaii. Dr. Rosanoff earned her Ph.D. degree in nutrition from the University of California at Berkeley in 1982, with a focus on minerals. And soon after, she discovered the well-researched but undertaught trove of research on nutritional magnesium, and as it relates to health and developed in the developed world. She's published many research articles in peer-reviewed journals and is dedicated to promoting knowledge of nutritional magnesium and is peer-reviewed science to health professionals and the general public. Dr. Rosanoff, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
So this is, I'm really like a kid in a candy shop because I'm so excited to chat with you. One, because you're an author who I've read your book, read you and Dr. Seeley's work a long time ago, and I continually find your research on PubMed when I'm researching magnesium, and you always have some of those insightful articles. And it's rare for me to get to, it's rare and it's a privilege for me to get to interview someone of your stature and your work in magnesium. So I'm so honored to have you today.
Well, that is just lovely. Thank you. I'm so glad that you contacted me. And at the Center for Magnesium Education and Research, CMER, which is our nonprofit organization, we are independent scholars, study magnesium, and our goal is to get knowledge of the peer-reviewed information about magnesium out to the world, the end user of it, the general public, as well as practitioners, health practitioners, because this is such a vital bundle of research that humanity has come up with. It has not been widely distributed for some unknown reason. And so that's what we are at CMER are about. So you're finding me and having this opportunity is just perfect. So thank you.
No, thank you. So Dr. Rosanoff, how did you get started in the world of magnesium research? What spurred your interest initially?
Oh, wow, that's such an interesting story. I did my master's and my doctorate in the minerals at Berkeley in the Department of Nutritional Sciences. So it was a really excellent, timely education, as you can imagine. And after I had finished my doctorate by about, I think, 2 years, I was invited to give a comment on a paper at a conference, an environmental conference on magnesium and cadmium. Now, I knew that cadmium was a toxic mineral, but I really didn't know that much about magnesium, even though I had just finished my degree, 6 years of studying the mineral. And so I went to the peer-reviewed literature, which at that time was not online, okay? And I was amazed at what I found. I was amazed at what I found. What I found was several articles from all over the world showing that in areas of low magnesium in the soil and or the water, rates of sudden cardiac death in those populations was much higher than the rest of the surrounding areas. I thought and of course, cardiovascular disease and death from cardiovascular disease being the number one killer in our nation and growing since then to the world, I was, of course, fascinated. So I had been taught about cholesterol, and I had been taught about high blood pressure and all those things that go along with cardiovascular disease. And here was this mineral, my field, and I had learned nothing about it. That's what sparked my interest in magnesium. And I started to read up on anything that I could find about magnesium. And I learned that I had not been taught a tremendous amount, one of the most important micronutrients that there is. It's just fell through the cracks. One of the things I found out, amazingly, you mentioned in a long time ago at the time, they talked about magnesium as being a cofactor for over 300 enzymes, which at the time was just really high. I mean, copper was counted at the time as having 4 enzymes, and zinc was maybe between 15 and 20. To give you an idea of how high 300 was, well, we now know that that's well over 900.
Wow.
It's well over 900. And one of the reasons is that magnesium is so crucial. So many physiological organ body systems is magnesium is an integral part of the ATP molecule. And the ATP molecule, adenosine triphosphate, is the energy molecule for life. Think of it as life's batteries. You know that the energy for all of life comes from the sun. It comes down, goes to chlorophyll in the plant, which, by the way, the center of it is magnesium.
Yep.
The plants are able to trap that energy in carbohydrates. And the way that what our metabolism does is to convert that energy and the carbohydrates to what? ATP, so that we can move our muscles, so we can think, so we can see, we can move, we can be alive. Our cells can be alive. That's ATP. Well, I was also not taught in my education that most, over 95, maybe even 98% of ATP in the world is magnesium ATP. There's some calcium ATP, there's some strontium ATP, and so on. But most of it is, in fact, magnesium ATP. So that makes magnesium sort of part of the batteries. And you guys all know what happens when you don't have batteries. When you run out of batteries, everything just stops. You think of magnesium as being an integral part of life's batteries, which is ATP. So you can see how important this nutrient is. So you can see why I took the time, and I'm glad you are too, Robert, of telling the world about this important micronutrient that somehow has just fallen below the radar.
It has. And I want to go back to, because you studied minerals, but you didn't even, you didn't really get, taught magnesium. Like what other minerals were being taught? The typical calcium, sodium, potassium, and magnesium was kind of, the wicked stepchild. Like, why did you study minerals back then? And why wasn't magnesium taught like you thought it should be?
Oh, that's a very interesting question. When I did my master's degree, I got interested in iron.
Okay.
Because I was interested in a folk remedy for iron deficiency anemia for children, which was sticking nails into apples. And I did my master's degree on that. I did the chemistry of it and found out, yes, that the iron in the apple went way up. And then we did a bioavailability study with rats on the bioavailability of the iron formed in the apple.
Wow.
And found it was really, really highly bioavailable. And it was interesting because we were saying, yes, that the folk remedy, and not only that, the folk remedy for iron was very safe for the children. In other words, one of the things about iron is that you can so easily overdo iron in a child.
Sure.
Even though toddlers really need iron. They really need it, but they need it in a controlled amount. So this folk remedy not only gave them good iron, it made it so that they would be almost impossible for them to get an overdose of it. Anyway, so that got me started in the minerals as I finished up my master's. So I thought, well, I'll just keep doing the minerals as I go on to my PhD. Then I did a thing on my PhD with the iron and the ascorbic acid, vitamin C. But what I was taught about in my general courses, we studied zinc, we studied manganese, we studied vanadium, we studied calcium, of course, very important. We studied iron quite a bit. We studied all of the other minerals as a group, sodium and potassium, of course. What I was taught about magnesium was three things. One, that magnesium deficiency was extremely rare. Not true.
Right.
Two, I was taught that magnesium deficiency is prominent in alcoholics. True. Three, I was taught magnesium deficiency only occurs with general malnutrition. I thought a lot about that over the years. Does general malnutrition include magnesium deficiency? I would say yes. When we see so much magnesium deficit, which I see so much in the developed world on the modern processed food diet, does that mean that we're also in a general malnutrition? Could be. Not in protein calorie malnutrition and the kwashiorkor and those horrible pictures we see of starving children. I don't mean that kind of malnutrition. I mean the kind of malnutrition where cardiovascular disease is very high in the population, where COPD is high, where depression is high, where suicidal tendencies are high, where anxiety is high, where it's so difficult to calm down. These parts of a malnutrition, we have a stressful, high life, and there's a lot going on. But if I could just take a second to talk about, if you wouldn't mind here.
Of course.
Get to my first slide here.
If for anyone listening, we are recording this with video, and Dr. Rosanoff is going to be sharing some slides. So if you're listening on Spotify, you can watch the video, and also on YouTube.
Okay. All right. So I'll keep that in mind, that some people are just listening, right? And they aren't seeing.
Yeah. But that's okay. That's okay. Yep.
So like I was saying, the three things I learned about magnesium: one, very rare. I found that to be not true. Two, in alcoholics, yes. Three, it's a part of general malnutrition. Those were the three things I learned, whereas I learned a vast amount about zinc, vast amount about calcium, huge amounts about iron. Those were all very, very well covered in my courses. But the ones on magnesium, the research on magnesium, which is also somewhat vast, not as vast, isn't as well funded in research grants and so on, because it's just isn't so known. It wasn't covered in my education. And I don't believe it's covered so much in medical education or in dietetics education or in nurses education or in other general medical educations.
You're right. That's what I see too, is most, nutrition courses, they focus on the macronutrients, proteins, carbohydrates, and fats, and little to no of the micronutrients. But they might talk about iron, they might talk about calcium, but typically no magnesium, unless you go to more holistic based schools, where I went. But even still, like it wasn't that big of a, a lot of people get that misconception that doctors should know every nuance about every mineral, but unless you're really in the field and studying and researching outside of school, and you have maybe a different diplomate or a different certification, you might not know as much nutrition. So doctors have different specialties all across the board.
It's true. And you know what? The reality is that no one can know everything about all of these nutrients anyway. There's 44 essential nutrients every human being has to have every day: adequacy and balance. And to know about all the science about all those 44 essential nutrients is no longer possible for one human being to do. I myself spent all my time studying magnesium, and I am still, believe it, I've been studying this since 1985. And I am still surprised on a daily basis with what I find. It's new. So there's a tremendous amount of knowledge that we're collecting, and we're making it available with the computer world and with online publications. I mean, what a boon that is to us. But we have to share what we know with each other if we're going to get a full knowledge, because there's no one of us who can possibly know it all.
Correct. But there's experts like you in the field of magnesium, and I'm so honored to talk about this with you. And so I want to go over some of the new stuff you've learned later on. But right now, I want to talk about the slides you have up, and what we're looking at here is a traditional diet versus a modern diet. And can you go over kind of what you found in your research of traditional diets and the amount of magnesium they contain versus the processed food standard American diet that we find today?
I'd be glad to. I'd be glad to. What this is a graph we did in this article, 2020 in Advances in Nutrition. And these are the same scales. Magnesium intake from 0 up to 1,300 milligrams per day per person. And this one is the same scale. And what we did was go into the research and get all of the publications that we could that measured the magnesium adult generalized mean intake and put them onto this graph and sort them out by traditional versus modern diets. And as you can see here, we have diets from the Aboriginal hunter-gatherer diets in Australia. We have one for rural India, which are very poor populations, but they are farming their own food, so it's still a traditional diet. We have estimates of the paleo diet here, and we have a traditional diet of Bedouins who were, it was a two-part study where they measured the magnesium input of the Bedouins on their traditional diet, plus the one where they switched over to just white bread. They just replaced their traditional bread with white bread. And let's look at them. Here we have the traditional diets, and you can see they range, the means range from between 400 and 700 milligrams a day. These are the paleo diets. These are just estimates of what it would be. But you can see people on the paleo diet were much higher. So even on the traditional diets of today, we're
Wow.
down to between 450, 700 milligrams a day per adult person in their natural diet. Okay.
And that's
Now
much
here,
more that's recommended, as you're I'm sure gonna allude to.
yeah, it is much more than recommended. It is much more than recommended, and that is a really good point to see. Now here on this side of the graph, these are values, and they're from 2004, 2008. They're all pretty recent. I think the oldest one is 2001. That's that traditional Bedouin I was telling you about. That was the same thing, same people, only when they switched from their traditional bread to just white bread they bought from the store. Look at the difference in magnesium. It went from 500 milligrams per day per person down to around 250. It went down by half every day. Okay.
It's crazy.
So yeah, it really is the food intake that we have, the amount of magnesium that is removed from the processing process of our food is large and has a huge impact on us. Now, I don't want to be too mad about processed food. We're feeding more people every day. The amount of calories and protein is doing better every day. But for the micronutrients, the processed food diet is not doing its job for full nutrition. Okay.
And for developed countries like in the US, it makes us gain weight. The obesity, epidemic is on the rise, and weight gain is surging like never before. And a lot of that's from the excess in processed foods. And so for everyone listening or watching, I want to just kind of point out that we're looking at the magnesium content just from the left to right. You'll see that it's drastically higher with the paleo diet, and these were, how many were these? What time frame were these on the left?
Well, these were, I think the earliest one was 1969.
Okay, so those are the years or the dates. Okay, got it.
Of the published values, right? The
Perfect.
published
Okay.
surveys in these populations they're not many, there are not many magnesium intake surveys, and so we found as many as we could, and to try and find an idea of what is the traditional diet in magnesium, right?
Yes.
Compared to what we're having today.
Wow.
One of the reasons why we wanted to do that is because some of the RDAs in other countries, in Europe and in the World Health Organization, one of the things that they use to set the RDA is the average intake, average actual intake in the population. And they say, oh, well, that's okay. And that's partly how they set what you need.
So anyone listening, RDA is a recommended dietary allowance, and it's usually set by the Nutrition Council and I think of it more of a minimum amount. For example, for magnesium, it's 420 for men and 350 for women, 370 if you're lactating or pregnant. But that's more the bare minimum. And we don't even meet that. And we don't even meet that based on this graph. And so many people have what you're going to talk about is a magnesium deficiency, and they don't even know it. So
yeah, that's right. And their doctors don't know it.
And the doctors don't know it.
And their dietitians don't know it. And one other thing to keep in mind about the RDAs, the recommended dietary allowances, they are set up specifically to maintain a healthy person from not getting a deficit. In other words, you don't have a cold, you don't have hypertension, you don't have the flu, you don't have high cholesterol, you don't have high blood sugar, okay?
You're not overweight. You're normal weight, right?
Right. You are of ideal body weight. That's right. And so the RDAs for all the micronutrients, as well as the proteins and the calories, are set. That's what they were set to do, is how much do you need in order to not get a deficit? But they were never measured in people who have hypertension, or people who have heart disease, people who have diabetes, or people who are obese, and so on. Okay, so keep that in mind when you're doing your nutritions for yourself and having supplements and designing your supplement pattern of what you're going to need. Is if you have any of these symptoms, chances are the RDA is not going to be enough for you. Yeah. And as you can see here, and when we take all of the graphs, so these are from Canada, UK, Europe, Japan, China, and so on, you can see that the amount of magnesium intake with diets adults are getting are in the 250 to 350 milligram range per day, whereas we believe the traditional diet is at least 450, 700. And in the paleo diets, whoa, 1100, 1200.
Wow.
Really? So we have to keep this in perspective of human evolution and how adaptive our bodies are to these decreasing amounts of micronutrients that are in our life, and how we keep going and we keep adapting. It's quite wonderful. We all want optimal health, and we all want longevity, and we all want to feel as good as we can the whole time we're alive. And of course, nutrition, all nutrition, including micronutrient nutrition, including magnesium nutrition, is vital for that to take place.
And another thing I want to point out, it seems like our human genome is adapted for a higher magnesium intake. And so if our metabolism and our ATP, our energy currency, as you pointed out earlier, is adapted to a higher intake, and we're not getting that intake, are we actually achieving or living our optimal, best health? I mean, we simply can't do it if we needed more magnesium and we're adapted to this higher intake based on this chart you just showed.
One of the interesting things that has come out in the last, I would say, 10 years, and it first happened in plants, by looking at the genetic expression, which of course the scientists can do now. Some plant biologists put plants on a low magnesium diet, if you were, low in the soil, because their roots in the soil are like our microvilli in our GI tract,
Great analogy.
Yeah, it is. And so when they found that when you put plants on a low magnesium diet, the first gene the change in its expression was biological clock gene.
Ah, okay.
And then that was found again in amoeba and in human cells and culture. So when we have a low amount of micronutrient in our diet, our genetic expression changes, and biological clock, whoa. People talk about, I can't sleep at night, I'm this, I'm that, and so on. I just bring that up as a general physiological trend of our time, and some of the research that is coming out these days that informs us about all the different parameters of impact magnesium can have in our daily individual lives.
It's mind-boggling how important it is and how there's just not enough research out there or publicity about it yet. So
That's
okay.
right. So people always say, so why? Why is our diet so low? Well, here's a couple of things. There's two things that I want to bring out. Whole grains are very high in magnesium, as are all seeds. This is what everybody says. Where do I get my magnesium the best way? All seeds are very high, not only in magnesium, but all the micronutrients that you need in a balanced amount. So seeds are a good way.
Like
Seeds,
pumpkin seeds, chia
nuts.
seeds,
Chia
Brazil.
seeds, nuts are seeds, beans are seeds, whole grains are seeds, right?
Right.
Any seed from the plant is a good source of magnesium and microminerals, okay? Now, what happens is, as you can see in this graph, we have here in the blue, the amount of magnesium, okay, up here in milligrams per 100 grams. In a whole wheat, it's about 140 milligrams magnesium per 100 grams of wheat. And in refined, which is the orange, it's 20 milligrams per 100 grams. That's a drop of 82%.
That's drastic difference.
Drastic difference. Here's corn and corn oil. Whole corn is not bad. It's around 30 milligrams per 100 grams. But when we take and we use corn oil, which taking out everything except the oil, you're taking out all the other minerals. And so it's about 0. And then high fructose corn syrup, of course, is definitely 0 magnesium in it. Here we have peanuts. Peanuts, as I said, nuts, a good seed. 100 milligrams per 100 grams of peanuts, wonderful food. And peanut oil, essentially 0. And then we have white and brown sugar. Brown sugar on the cane is a high magnesium, high potassium, high micro mineral source of food. But when we refine it down to white sugar, they're very proud of it, that they take everything out except the sucrose.
Strip it all out. Yeah.
Yeah, they love that. I mean, because they did it, during the big industrial revolution, and it was just like, oh, look what we can do. It's so wonderful. We can purify things out of the ground, and it was a boon to civilization, I suppose, and everything. It's also, remember that refined sugar is for some people a very addictive substance. And it's put in almost all of our foods. So our food supply is a lot of refined wheat, right? It's 20 milligrams per 100 grams. A lot of corn oil or other oils, and white sugar. So we are putting these tiny little things all together and making a huge array of packaged, wonderful, tasty, popular, easy, grab, I can eat this fast and get energy foods. And so our diet is drastically low. Now, there's one other thing I want to bring out, and that's the water.
Yes.
Water at the beginning of, say, the 20th century, we got from wells and from rivers and surface water and well water, which was very variable in magnesium and the other minerals, but much higher when we started doing regional collection of water treatment centers. Did so much for taking out bacteria and deadly pathogens from our water supply. It was a huge boon in public health, but it lowered the amount of magnesium in general was in the water supply. And then around the 40s and the 50s, after the World War II, and we really started to industrialize things, the industries wanted to have the hard water made into soft water, because there was a scum on all of their machinery. It was crusting up, well, in our washing machines and our dishwashers and things. It wasn't good. Well, and that hard water is really magnesium and calcium is causing that. And so they started water softening. And what did that mean? That meant take out the magnesium and take out the calcium. So during that time in the 50s and afterwards, the amount of magnesium went down again in our water supply. And then with around the 90s, the 1990s or so, bottled water, which in the United States is mainly deionized water, which means zero magnesium, started being the most popular water supply. I drink it myself. Please don't. I drink it myself. It's so easy. You have such confidence that it's really clean and everything. It is. We've taken our water supply, our nutrient of magnesium from the water supply over about 100 years ago, from 140, 150 milligrams a day down to essentially zero.
Wow.
That's something to keep in mind also of what has happened to us and why our intakes are so very low.
So we're getting about 150 milligrams of magnesium through water, through mineral water before, and now we're getting essentially zero.
About.
Yep.
That's a rough thing. You know what I mean? You get down to different areas and it's all over the map, you know.
Yeah.
It's a wide range. But in general, you can say we've gone from here down to here.
Sure. So with that being said, I want to talk about water just a little bit. I'm a big fan of mineral water. I got my crazy water right here, which is rich in natural minerals from mineral wells in actually Texas. But what is your favorite type of water to drink? What should people look for in a good quality mineral water in order to naturally increase maybe some magnesium intake? Do you have any recommendations?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of different mineral waters. General things, yes. Mineral water, especially the ones from Europe, can be either high in magnesium or high in calcium or both. I don't think it's good on our low magnesium diet that we're all on to increase the calcium.
Sure.
And so if you go for a mineral water, make sure it's a high magnesium water and maybe has less calcium or even no calcium is what I would say. Depending on your state of health and where you're at, the first thing you want to do is bring your magnesium up before you start supplementing with too much calcium.
Yes.
So I would just put that out there. There is a water source in Northern California called Adobe Springs water. It's 110 parts per million magnesium.
Oh, wow.
I think it's a good source of water. They used to have it in a product called Noah's water. I'm not so sure where it's available now. And remember, buying water online shipping is ridiculous.
Sure.
It's ridiculous.
For water, right.
Yeah. But then also there are a lot of people also have a point of a source. In other words, they have a water purifier right on their taps so that they get purified water. Check and see. Many of these are taking everything out. They're just taking everything out. They're taking out any magnesium or calcium in it. And if that's true, you're gonna want to have to supplement more with magnesium or use more transdermal magnesium. It would be really better if you had a nice source of high magnesium water. It would be great if we would start putting magnesium into our water supplies and we just drank the water. I think that would be the best way. It's not in our life at this point. Maybe in 20 years, knowledge base will get up there so that we say, hey, you guys, we can do this. We can
that'd be amazing.
We can have healthy water systems,
Dr. Rosanoff, I don't know if we're going to talk about this later, but I wanted to mention it now. Can you talk about the interaction between calcium and magnesium?
Sure. Wow, it's a big subject.
I know, but I wanted to cover it.
All right. Yes, it is an important one. Okay. Oh, I wished I had my other slide up here, Robert. But let me see if I can go through it for you guys. Calcium and magnesium are in the same line up on the periodic table. So chemically, they are very similar. But biologically, they're doing this dance of opposite partners. Calcium makes things active, magnesium calms them down. And so together they do this dance that activates cells, activates organs, activates hormone production, and so on. For example, let's just take, there's a good 2-minute video on this on my webpage, on the center's webpage. There's calcium and there's magnesium inside the cell. And when a cell is at rest, there's an environmental stimuli of any kind, and the cell needs to become active. What happens is the calcium starts to rush into the cell and comes out of little hiding places within the cell. So that the amount of calcium in the cytosol comes up, so that the reference between calcium and magnesium goes up, and this sets off this different gradient of calcium up here and magnesium down here, sets off the cell into this active mode. Sometimes it's called a cytokine storm. Sometimes it's just called a calcium storm. In other words, it sets off a whole bunch of reactions that go, and it makes the cell active. If it's a muscle cell, it'll tense. If it's a nerve cell, it'll fire, okay? If it's a hormone cell, it'll start to make the hormone it's programmed to make. Now, when the environmental stimulus is gone, and the cell doesn't need to be in active mode anymore, what happens is the calcium, if there's enough magnesium in that cell, if the calcium is pushed back out of the cell, it's pushed down into its little hiding places within the cell, the magnesium comes back up, the calcium goes back down, and the cell goes into resting state. Resting state, because it doesn't need to be active, okay? Now, if there's not enough magnesium in that cell, what can happen is the calcium-magnesium ratio can stay high because there's not enough magnesium to push that calcium back out where it needs to be. And so that cell cannot go into a resting state. It's not possible chemically for that cell to go into full rest mode. It is forced to stay semi-active. And what do we get when this happens? We get nerves that fire when there's no environment to say fire. We get muscles that tense up when there's no environmental thing that says, I need tense muscles right now. We get hormone, adrenaline production when there is no need for adrenaline. Because why? Magnesium, a low magnesium in the cell is in itself a trigger. It says danger.
It's telling your body that there's something's going on and we need to fix it. But if you don't know the fix, which is magnesium, you can never get out of that fight or flight or that sympathetic dominance.
That's right. That's right. That's right. So here we are in this population we've talked about before, where the input is low in diets because of our processed food. Our water supply has been getting lower and lower. At the same time, environmental stresses are growing on a daily basis. What we have to hear, what we have to see, what we have to respond to, you know, amazing we're doing as well as we are.
It is amazing.
In addition to that, and I wish Robert, I have a slide for this that we can show sometime later.
Okay.
That is, I went and did calcium and magnesium intakes in the United States, measured by the USDA, you know, does studies on it every year. And we found that since the 1970s, calcium to magnesium intake ratio has gone up and up and up in the United States in our diets. The magnesium has stayed pretty stable, which is low, 250, 300. Too low, but it hasn't gone down. Whereas the calcium intake in our foods has gone up, creating a bigger break. So in other words, not only are we low in magnesium, we are also, in comparison, high in calcium. So we have a high intake ratio. Now, that's not, I'm talking about in our cells. I'm talking about just what we feed into our bodies.
Dietary.
A high calcium to magnesium intake ratio. And this can interfere with several things that you don't want to have. You don't want to have.
Exactly.
So that's another reason to bring your magnesium up. And that's another reason, be careful in supplementing with calcium until you have enough magnesium to cope with it well.
Yes, and I know it's not happening as much, but I know a couple years ago, a lot of doctors, and maybe like for decades, doctors recommend calcium. You need 800 milligrams of calcium carbonate for bone health. One, it's not even that absorbable, but two, you're depleting magnesium. And so now more supplement companies are becoming more aware of the calcium to magnesium ratio. So they'll have more of like a 1-to-1 ratio, which I think is good, but still a lot of doctors don't know too much about magnesium. So they'll still recommend these super high doses of calcium only. And it's doing exactly what you said. It's doing the opposite of what they want.
It is. It's a shame. And it's because they haven't been educated in all of this magnesium research. They weren't taught about it. And so they don't understand. And what they're trying to do with and even in the research projects, when they give more calcium and they find they're trying to save people from osteoporosis. They're really trying to help. They're really trying, but that extra calcium is not going to help unless you have enough magnesium to properly metabolize it.
Yes. Thank you for sharing that. So important.
Yes, that's right. Well, I want to talk a little bit about, I don't know, should we just go on with CLMD?
Yeah, let's do it.
This is a lot of stuff, I feel like
it is. And if we don't have enough time, we'll do
people's throats.
I know. Well, we need it. And I'm thoroughly enjoying this.
Okay. I want to talk now a little about what are the long-term implications of just a small negative daily magnesium balance. And what do I mean by that? Nutritionists measure what's called nutrient balance. And they will do an experiment with human beings, healthy human beings usually. They measure all of the nutrient that is going in, and they measure all of the nutrient that's going out. And that is the feces and the urine, even the hair sometimes, and the skin cells. And they say, okay, what is your balance? And the ideal is, of course, the amount of magnesium you put in is going to be at least equal to or surpass the amount that goes out on a daily basis. That's magnesium balance. Now, what happens if we have even a tiny, small negative magnesium balance on a chronic level? Now, remembering we have about 25 grams of magnesium in the healthy human adult body. If we are low per day of just 2 milligrams of magnesium, okay, which is very small. You couldn't even measure it in a balanced study on humans. It's too small.
Sure.
If you had it every single day for an entire year, that would be 730 milligrams a year, almost 1 gram, okay, about 3/4 of 1 gram. And remember, we're talking about 25 grams in the whole human body. That's in 1 year. In 5 years, that's going to be around 3.5 grams of a loss that your body has had to adjust to. It's just 2. If you had a negative balance of 5 milligrams a day magnesium, which is still very, very small, that would be about 1.8 grams in a year. And in 5 years, that would be 9 grams, almost a little more than a third of your entire body's magnesium. And if you had 50 milligrams magnesium loss per day, every day, that would be 18 grams in 1 year, 91 grams in 5 years. In other words, almost 4 times your entire body's magnesium. You see that these small, incremental, day by day, chronic, small amounts of magnesium are doing quite a bit of, your body has to do a huge adjustment. And we call this chronic latent magnesium deficit. Chronic latent magnesium deficit. In other words, your doctor really isn't going to see it, even parameters they're looking for in this day and age. A lot of people that are this low they'll develop hypertension, they'll develop heart disease, they'll develop COPD, and so on, and all the other things. The other thing, chronic low diet, and we also have a chronic use of certain medications that is also lowering magnesium status on a daily basis. So things like proton pump inhibitors lowers the serum magnesium, and some of the other
Blood pressure drugs.
long-term
Yeah.
you're taking every single day these medications to essentially help you survive from a magnesium deficit.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Going back to the root cause.
Yeah,
So
that's right.
for the CLMD, or the chronic latent magnesium deficiency, are we going off the RDA for this, or what are we going off of?
Oh, no, it's not the RDA. It's just an individual. No, this hasn't been quantified on a in a. It hasn't been quantified really in human beings. They do things like the magnesium load test.
Okay.
The magnesium load test to see what is the state of your CLMD, or do you have CLMD, right? Because a person walking around, you can't look at them and say, oh, you have a chronic latent magnesium deficit. What does that mean? Because when you are low in magnesium on a day-by-day basis, your body is going to have to maintain the magnesium in your heart and in your brain. And it will take it, we know, it will take it out of your bones. And it will take it out of your cellular membranes in order to keep vital function of your body going. And so it's hard to measure it in a human being. And so some people do what's called the what was I just calling it?
The load test?
Load test, that's right. But those aren't standardized. It's very difficult. But what they essentially do is they give you a load of magnesium, either oral or IV or IM, and they collect all your urine for 24 hours, and they measure how much have you excreted of that load in your urine in 24 hours. And if you have excreted 40% or more of that, and they say, oh, you don't really have a deficit.
Because your body's not holding on to it.
Because your body's not holding on to it. It's just putting it right out. If your body is retaining more than 40%, at least 40% of that or on up, and why? Your body is retaining that magnesium because it needs it. And that would be a definition of a chronic latent magnesium deficit. There's another way we are thinking of measuring, and that's on this graph. In serum magnesium has a large range. I'm showing here from way down here where you're in the hospital essentially and you're dying. This is usually the current normal range is marked right in here. And this is what doctors are told. This is, if you're right in here, you're fine. But what we're saying is that this chronic latent magnesium deficit really can be seen in this area of serum magnesium. But this is not for everybody because everybody's different. And so that's one way to more easily tell than a chronic, a load test, okay? What are the symptoms of having a chronic latent magnesium deficit? I'm listing here. We have things,
just a few.
irregular heartbeats can happen. A lot of people are getting atrial fibrillation. But doctors don't know it's magnesium and they're giving all kinds of meds. They're not going to the root cause. And they're building up and dealing with their chronic latent magnesium deficit. If it goes on this way, they're going to get heart disease. They're going to get more symptoms of magnesium deficit, which go into some very severe chronic diseases that are the big killers in our society.
Yes.
High cholesterol, high blood pressure, heart palpitations, mitral valve prolapse. Imagine. That's been known for a long time. In fact, I had one person who called me up and said, I've got a mitral valve prolapse. What do I do? Well, I knew that that person had had rheumatic fever when she was a child. And I said, start taking as much magnesium as you can, by 700 milligrams a day.
Wow. From supplements.
And so she started taking 700 milligrams a day. And after about 3, 6, 8 months, something like that, she called, got diarrhea. What do I do? And I said, that's great. You have now replaced your magnesium deficit. Your body is letting it out. cut down your magnesium supplement. Don't ever go lower than 150. But you don't have to have that 700 anymore. And guess what? Her mitral valve prolapse was gone.
Wow, that's amazing.
It is amazing. This nutrition is real. You know what I mean? It's long term. It's not quick. You understand what I'm saying,
Right,
Robert?
right.
It's
You have to be
going
consistent.
to the core thing that the entire society has been living for a couple of generations.
And I always say the same thing, Dr. Rosanoff. I say if you're going to start magnesium and you're deficient, we can't just start off with, the standard 200 milligrams. We have to go higher and we have to load magnesium because you're not going to come over this chronic latent magnesium deficit just by taking a standard maintenance dose if you're already so low to begin with. So we have to start up high, get the cells saturated, get it saturated into our body. Once it happens, as you mentioned, you can have one of the interesting reasons for magnesium is constipation. A lot of people use magnesium oxide or citrate to induce a bowel movement. But if you're taking some of the other forms and you're having a bowel movement, maybe you're taking too much. Could you have do you ever talk about the natural fail safe of too much magnesium and how you'll go to the bathroom? I know that's been mentioned somewhere.
Have always, Robert, and I got this from my mentor, Mildred Seelig, who was an MD, and she studied magnesium for over 40 years. Remarkable scholar, remarkable doctor. And she said, yes, you need to take magnesium supplements. Almost everybody does. And let your body tell you. If your body gets diarrhea, back off the amount. Back off the amount till it's comfortable. Change the form till it's comfortable. Change to 1, 2, 3 times a day if that's what you have to do. But you want to get in as much as you can with your body telling you, yes, I can take in. Yes, I can integrate this into my body comfortably. This is comfortable. Let your body tell you. You want to start, like you say, you need to start as high as you can. And then as your body will tell you when you're filling it up, you don't need so much of a supplement. You know what I mean? Especially with the rest of your diet. If you all of a sudden you switch to all whole grains and all nuts, and you've really changed your diet and you've changed your environment so you aren't so stressed all the time. All of these change. If you have to keep going at maximum speed and everything, then it might take a little bit longer, or you might need more of a supplement. Everybody's different. The other thing that can help that I use and that I believe in is a transdermal magnesium cream that I have developed, and that I know that it goes in. We've done a clinical trial, and maybe some other time we can talk about that. I can show you the research.
Yes, I would love to. Would love to.
Yeah.
Because some people can't tolerate supplements because it makes them go to the bathroom. So maybe a transdermal delivery, like the cream you developed and research, could be a good option.
That's right. What we found in our research, which is just preliminary, unfortunately, we have to do a larger study, but we did find it raised in humans serum magnesium in 2 weeks, the same amount as oral magnesium supplements did in 3 months.
Really?
Yes.
So it's crossing, obviously, the skin barrier, getting absorbed, and it's wow. So compared to supplements, that's a huge deal. So
yes, it's an additional tool that we have in the environment that we have been born into and that we're living in. It's an additional tool that we have to try to come out of this chronic latent magnesium deficit and to keep us from going into one.
yes, I'm all for any type of magnesium getting into your body, whether it's an Epsom salt bath, mineral water, supplements, magnesium-rich foods, transdermal magnesium, liposomal, whatever the new form comes out, whatever you have to do to get out of magnesium deficiency, do it. Whatever works for you, keep it up.
That's right. That's right. It's good. Now I've got a whole bunch of other things I could talk about today, one last thing. How about this? This is in the USA, the hypertension related diseases. Now this is a scale of average daily deaths in the United States. And this is just during the pandemic, from March 2020 to February 2022. You can see this pink line are the daily deaths from COVID. And drastic that was on the health of the United
Mm-hmm.
States. Well, take a look at this dark blue line, the top one up here. It's heart disease. And this one has been up here at, over 2,000 deaths every day for decades. Decades.
Right.
We are in a crisis in our country, and it's spreading around the world. Heart disease is the #1 killer. And it's magnesium, and they're getting all these meds for it and trying to cure it. It's magnesium. It is low magnesium diet that is highly associated with these death rates. I want to give you a perspective on how serious this is. A little tiny bit more when we look at these serum reference ranges. One of the things that's hard for your doctor is that the serum magnesium values are given in different labs, have different units: millimoles per liter, milligrams per deciliter, milliequivalents per liter. All three will be available in different labs. So one doctor talks about a 1.82, and another doctor says, but I have 1.75. They don't realize they're talking about the same exact number. They just have different units. That's
Sure.
one issue. Another thing that's going on is that this reference range varies, I'm sorry to say, from hospital to hospital. Let me just take a look. Here is the reference range that was recently published, 2022, in Disease of the Month review on hypomagnesemia. Reference range for serum magnesium, they said, was from here up to here, right?
Wow. Okay.
Here all the way down here. Well, we consider it's causing a lot of asymptomatic magnesium deficit. Now, here's another one. Here's that same one. This recent one came up. This was a study, black line here, of 95% of healthy adults in the United States in the years 1771 to 1774, 50 years ago, which is the only measure that we have. It's the only measure that the whole world has at this point, okay, of just a healthy population. What is the serum magnesium? And you can see that range, if 95% of them go from here to here. And that's why most of our intervals fall within this area, right?
Based on data from
Don't go all the way
1971
down
to
here.
1974. Wow.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
And a lot has
That's right.
changed
So
since then.
that's what, yes, a lot has changed in the last 50 years, and it hasn't been remeasured, okay? And so that is what is driving most of the reference ranges that your doctors are familiar with, okay? In addition to it being expressed in all these different reference units, okay? So now let's just add to it just a tiny bit. Here's that same graph I was showing you before. We have found recently around the world and even within different labs in the United States, reference range that is set as normal, you can see it's all over the map.
All over the map.
All over the map. So if you go into this, you have your blood taken at this place right here, and your blood is this certain level, they're going to say, oh, you have a magnesium deficit. We better give you some magnesium supplements. Whereas if you walk in that same day to this place, they're going to say, oh, you're fine. Absolutely fine. So that's what's going on right now in terms of it, in addition to the fact that most doctors are not even requesting a serum magnesium for their patients. It's not on basic chemical, clinical metabolic balance. It's just not, it's not on it. Calcium is on it.
It's not on a CMP, it's not on a
Cholesterol's on
CBC.
it.
Yeah, it's got all the other electrolytes. It's got calcium, it's got chloride, potassium, sodium,
Right.
but no magnesium.
No,
And
magnesium.
another thing on the serum test, and I always say this, is that serum testing for magnesium was kind of controversial because it's only 1% or less of the actual magnesium in our body. But I know there's a dynamic interplay for absorption through different dietary food sources to keep serum balance up. So you can actually be normal on the serum test, but still be suboptimal.
Absolutely.
And so go over with serum testing in particular, because that's still the most common way to test. What is the optimal range of magnesium. And I know you have a whole research article that you've done on this very same subject. So I would love to hear your insights.
Okay, what we believe is a controversial subject, but what we believe is the optimal range, and we have had two independent research groups come up with the same one. Looking at all the research they can find, there was a group in the United States and there was a group in Germany of magnesium research, and they both came up with this range right here, 0.85 to 0.95 millimoles per liter, which translates to about 2.06 to 2.3 milligrams per deciliter. Same thing. We consider that to be in your doctor's office. That is probably a good reference range. You're probably pretty safe. If you are a little bit lower than that, but still in the what is commonly seen as the normal range.
Normal, yeah.
Commonly seen as the normal range. In reality, you probably have a chronic latent magnesium deficit. But take a look then at your symptoms. You have muscle cramps, you have muscle soreness, you have muscle tension, you have muscle twitches, you ever have convulsions, you have anxiety, you have depression. Are you having trouble sleeping at night? You have hostility, irritability, panic attacks, hearing loss, ringing in the ears, restlessness, constant movement, hyperactivity, tingling, tinnitus, chronic fatigue, apathy, you know what I mean? On it goes. If you have any of these things and your serum magnesium is below 0.85 millimoles per liter or below, what was it? I know those numbers not so well. 2.06 milligrams per deciliter. Taking a magnesium supplement is just not going to hurt you.
Right. Right.
It is not going to hurt you, and hopefully it will keep. If it is a magnesium deficit that's causing these symptoms, you're not going to progress if you give your body enough magnesium so that it doesn't progress in its deficiency.
And it's so safe unless you have like a chronic kidney disease or myasthenia gravis, you know, which are very rare to begin with. Those are like the only two diseases I can think of that would be a contraindication for magnesium supplementation. Everything else is pretty safe, but of course, always ask your doctor before trying a new supplement. Dr. Rosanoff, I've always said on the serum test, like 2.2 to 2.5 is kind of like the optimal range, but based on this, it looks like it's more that 2.1 to 2.33. Or
no, you keep what you have, Robert. That's good. Or are there magnesium researchers who would go with yours and say, no, it has to be a little, this one was a compromise.
Sure.
Because they don't want to go too high, but there's a controversy even within magnesium researchers that it really needs to be higher.
And I know there's a whole controversy between the serum test to begin with, but it's, you know, one of the best tools that one of the most widely used tools that we have at our disposal. So let's, you know, use it and look at the more optimal range versus normal range. Then there's also tests like the RBC test or the low test, which is very hard to do, not cumbersome. But the RBC magnesium test has been, I guess, more reliable for predicting magnesium deficiency. But again, it's more costly than the serum test.
Have you used it in your practice, and has it helped you?
Well, I think I told you this before. If you're coming to me with an injury, with a back pain or a chronic muscle pain, I already know you have magnesium deficiency. And so, yes, we can test, we can get the validation, but typically if you have the signs and symptoms of magnesium deficiency coming in, you know, let's address those, get to the root cause. And then if you're telling me you don't sleep well, you have a high stress, high anxiety, I'm already going to recommend magnesium. But if we want to test, and you know, I do look at lab reviews, and if I see a serum test, I'll, you know, go to the optimal range. If it's a patient who wants to get very specific, we'll do some more testing. We can look at RBC. I've never done a load test, and I kind of want to try that on myself first. But I have been known to use RBC magnesium testing more frequently. But
does it respond to a magnesium supplement program?
Yes.
And what kind of a time frame?
I typically test 3 to 4 months because the red blood cell turnover is about 120 days. So usually I try to supplement accordingly or have them a supplement and then retest at that point. But yeah, I've seen drastic changes on lab tests, and the patients know, they feel it, they can tell the difference. You know, I get just so many anecdotal feedback, positive testimonials. Hey, oh my gosh, my migraines have gone away. I'm sleeping throughout the night. My kids are better. You know, I give my kids magnesium gummies
Right.
because
Yeah.
they eat a processed food diet.
Of course,
Um,
we all do. We
and
all do.
you know, I used to as well, and now I try not to as much, but I still live in a fast-paced world, in a fast-paced environment, lots of
Yeah.
stress, lots of things going on, good and bad. And magnesium is literally, I would not be the same person without magnesium. It's changed my life for the better. And I want everyone to be aware of how important magnesium is. And it's getting more popular, but it's just not enough yet. And so I
Yeah.
really appreciate all the fantastic work that you've done with the Center for Magnesium Education and Research. And so, guys, if you haven't already, and if you feel, you know, and if you feel like this calls to you, you know, consider maybe donating to this research foundation, because they're coming out with new research. The FDA just came out with a health claim, an approved health claim for hypertension. Now, certain foods, if they meet their criteria, and that was spurred off your work, right?
Absolutely. We
That
did
was
that.
how many FDA health claims for magnesium have you guys got approved over the years?
Well, we only went in for one for hypertension, and it's the first health claim for magnesium. It's the third one for hypertension.
Wow. So
There's a
thank you.
lot of work.
How
It
many
took us
years,
years.
how many years was it for it to get approved?
Oh, I passed it. We went about 6 years.
Oh my gosh. Well,
Yeah.
I so that that article came through on social media on my feed, I think in January, and I, you know, I did a few videos on it, and it's just so happy to see that magnesium is finally getting some recognition. You know, some recognition. It needs so much more, but wow.
That's really true. And I would like everybody to know we are a group of independent scholars, because institutions are not into studying magnesium that much. But we felt like it needed to be. It needed to be taught and researched and gotten out to the general public as well as medical professionals. And that's why we did the hypertension claim with the FDA. It was a lot of work. So if anybody is so inclined in supporting our work, we can always use donations. We're a 501c3, we're nonprofit. You can go onto our webpage and there's a donate button. You can always use your money because all of our work is costly. And when we need to publish in peer-reviewed journals, there's page charges and things like that. So we can always use your help to keep getting the word out, and we would always appreciate it.
Of course. Yeah. Thank you so much for the work that you've done. Dr. Rosanoff, if you could unshare your screen, and I just want to ask you a few quick, fun questions to round out this amazing interview with you.
Okay.
Okay. We covered a lot, but there's still so much more to cover with magnesium. And I could talk all day with you, but I know your schedule is busy. So I wanted to kind of conclude this interview with a few questions with you.
Okay.
First is this might not be a brief question, but we'll see how it goes. Is how did you write or get inspired to write The Magnesium Factor? And how was the involvement with Dr. Sealing, one of the other pioneers in research in magnesium?
That's one of my favorite stories of my life. I was sick after I finished my degree and was out working in Silicon Valley for a while. I got chronic fatigue syndrome and collapsed one day. And it turned out it was chronic fatigue syndrome. I was in bed for 3 years.
Wow.
But I had already had my experience with magnesium, so it was in my mind. And after about 5 years of having to go on disability, I was able to sit up at the computer again. And there was PubMed for free on the computer. I was searching away magnesium and everything. And I realized that the research on it in just the 10 years that since I had discovered it, had just blossomed, and it was more robust. And at the same time, all the antihypertensive medications were coming in. And I thought, I need to write a book. I need to write a book. And I was in Los Angeles riding on a bus. And as I was riding there, Robert, the whole idea, the whole outline of looking at all the research with each heart disease risk factors and its relationship to magnesium came to me. And I thought, I can do that. I can do that. And that'll be fun. In my time when I'm well enough, and when I'm sick, I won't. But that would be doing. I got really excited, and I'm on the bus. And as I'm on the bus, I look out the window, and we are just driving past Cedar Sinai. Cedar Sinai, if you guys have ever seen it in Los Angeles, it is an entire city block, goes up at least 8 to 13 stories. I mean, it is gigantic. And it was a message that said to me, ho, 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 who are you kidding? That you're going to write this wonderful thing and you're going to make any impression on this. And I went, well, I'm going to do it anyway. I can't get a job because I'm sick. I can't do this. This is what I'm going to do. That is what inspired the book, The Magnesium Factor. And in the process of getting started on it and writing on it, I had remembered Mildred Seelig because I had met her at a conference when I was still active and running around. And I decided I would call her, and I could find her on the web in those days. It was easy to find somebody. And I called her and I said, hi, I would like to interview you, Robert, just like you did.
It's kind of like I did with you.
Exactly the same. And she said, oh, I've always wanted to write a book for the lay public. Can I help you with it?
Wow.
And so that is how we became co-authors. I said, of course, and I made her the primary author, but she had me do all of the research to bring it up to date and do most of the writing. And she had input on every single thing. And that's how we came up with the Magnesium Factor.
Wow. When was that first published?
2002.
2002.
It needs to be updated. It really does need to be updated.
But still, it's a great resource. One of my first resources when I was, trying to write my book is reading the Magnesium Factor and seeing your name, seeing Dr. Seeling's name. Wow. And how many research articles have you, been published in?
Oh gosh, I don't know, 30, 40.
Golly.
Some of them of my own and then some with colleagues, and
are they all magnesium, or is there any different ones on other minerals, or?
Well, of course, I'm interested in calcium. And of course, I'm interested in vitamin D because vitamin D has become so popular. But remember when we talked at the beginning about how magnesium is necessary for so many reactions? Not 300, probably 900, maybe even more because of ATP. It turns out that magnesium is required for the activation of vitamin D. And you read so much that vitamin D, serum vitamin D, is low in so many people. Well, how much of that is a low magnesium? That is, so I'm interested in vitamin D for that reason. I'm interested in calcium for that reason. More and more zinc. I know that there's a zinc magnesium ratio that is important to health, the copper to magnesium ratio that is important to health, calcium magnesium ratio that's important to health. And my guess is all of them have ratios that, in fact, there's an optimal level of each and every one of them for human health, is my guess.
And it's funny, all the minerals that you mentioned, they all have interactions with magnesium. So
yes, they do.
Yes,
they do. So that's how, Robert, so much, as you well know, you get into PubMed and, you put in a word and there's 9,000 or 900 or something like that. And so you have to pick and choose what you can do and what you can get into. When I was first writing the book, I would take them all and I would put them all out with their abstracts. And then I would get the ones that I had to have in full text.
Yep.
Write it all up. I had time to do that, and that's the kind of work that's necessary. I just want to shout out a word for Mildred Seelig. She did that before we had online searching, which meant she went from library to library to library, the anthropology library, the medical library, the biology library, the zoology library, the botany library, the nutrition library, the public health library, physiology library, finding these articles one by one that she gathered, write the book that she published in the 1980s called The Route to Cardiovascular Disease.
Wow. And that spurred so much more research, from that point to your book, to the research that you've done, to the Center for Magnesium Research and Education. So Can't thank you
This is
enough.
solid. This is solid research. That's why this is solid science, peer-reviewed research. It's just not made it up into our paradigm.
Not yet. Not
No,
yet.
not yet.
So a few questions for you.
Mhm.
What supplements, I know you do transdermal magnesium, but what other supplements have you tried? Is there a certain form of magnesium that you find works best for you? Or have you tried what
I
other
have tried.
all of
Okay,
them?
this is I've over the last 35 years. I've tried them all, and I do. I Research tells me it is the magnesium dose, not the form, that is the most important thing.
Okay.
It is the elemental magnesium dose that if it doesn't do anything for you, take a second pill.
Okay.
The dose. Make sure you're getting, if you've got a condition, 600, 700, 800, as much as you can get in. If you're trying to just maintain your health, you want to do the dose of magnesium anywhere from 300, 150 to 350 to 400, anything that is comfortable for your body. Or a combination of oral and transdermal, which is what I do. I do a combination, and I do magnesium oxide, I do magnesium citrate and malate and carbonate and glycate. I mean,
Yep.
I do a combination of them all, and I will switch around. What I focus on is the dose of magnesium that I get in every day.
So
And
you
I
don't get
have chronic fatigue syndrome, and so I try to get 800 to 900 milligrams orally every day. Plus, I use my transdermal cream twice a day.
and you're eating whatever magnesium rich foods on a okay. So that's a lot of magnesium, but that's just shows I take a lot of magnesium myself as well. And I find that I feel
Yeah,
better when I take around 600 milligrams of magnesium from supplements. And that's not
makes
including
sense.
the magnesium from water. I do a transdermal lotion from time to time, and I do like Epsom salt baths. And I do give my kids Epsom salt baths periodically. Okay,
I'll
so
send
that's
you some of my cream. I'll send you some
yeah,
of
I
my
would love
cream.
that. I would love that.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so what are your favorite magnesium rich foods that you like to consume on a daily or
Cocoa.
cocoa, dark chocolate?
Cocoa.
Okay.
Cocoa
Of
and nuts.
course.
I make a smoothie every day, almost every day, every other day. Of bananas, 4 ounces of banana, big heaping tablespoon of cocoa, 2 ounces of nuts, usually walnuts and pecans or whatever nuts I
Uh-huh.
have, and a cup of milk. And I mix that all up. And I know that that is a high magnesium, high potassium balanced food. I love cocoa.
I do
And I
too.
love nuts, 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 nuts. You can't go wrong with nuts, although they're getting pretty expensive these days.
Yes, they are. Yes, they are.
And flax seeds. Flax seeds. Sometimes I take flax seeds and I grind them up fresh and then put a little bit of milk on them and eat them like a cereal.
Okay, that sounds good.
Sunflower seeds, and any kind of seeds. And nuts and seeds. That's what I grab for a snack.
Nice. Good
I
magnesium rich
eat a lot
snack.
of dairy. I do not take any calcium supplements. That has not worked well for me, and I don't think the research really supports it for a lot of people in our society.
Well, we get so much through
But
our
I
diet.
do, huh?
We get so much
But I
calcium through our
do.
diet. Yeah.
There's a lot of calcium in the diet, so I eat cheese and I drink milk, and I have a high I get about probably 1,000 milligrams a day calcium in my diet.
Great.
Then I try and get at least 800 milligrams from supplements, my magnesium in addition to my diet, and I have the transdermal. I also, I make sure that at my doctor's appointment, they measure my serum magnesium. And with all that supplementation in 30 years, it has never been high.
Never been too high.
Never been high.
With that amount of magnesium, so everyone listening, she's been doing this much magnesium from supplements, transdermal, all the magnesium rich foods, and she hasn't got a super high level on a serum test. So
No.
yep. Thank you for sharing.
Each person, that kind of a practice and watching your own health, everybody's different. Remember, everybody's different.
Everybody's different. Okay. So one question, a fun question I like to ask is if you could put a billboard on one of the busiest interstates, maybe in LA or California, or maybe Hawaii where you live now, that could have one or two sentences that are health related that you'd want everyone to see, what would you put and why?
Ooh, wow. I would probably put, are you getting enough magnesium today?
Yes.
How can you tell? And I would want to have a QR code that they could go to where all the things we've talked about today were simply, easily, in a modern way, put out to people.
Like the
I
Cliff Notes
know,
guide for magnesium. Yes.
yeah, it's visual because I see, I mean, I'm 78 years old, okay? So I see that the world now is very, I mean, videos and pictures, and it's just way beyond what my education was done in that area. I'm still word, and numbers, you know what I mean, and tables and graphs. I would really love to collaborate with young people who care about this as much as I do, who would take what I know about magnesium and translate it into today's modern visual, quick language that would that, that would put out to the world an interesting question and the way for them to find the answer for themselves
Mm,
without it being a completely commercial give us money, give it, because that's the other thing that's impinging on it is
right.
this lack of trust with send me money, send me money, send me money, be a follower. No. I just want to give out the information.
I love it. So like maybe like Got Mag, like the old Got Milk
Yes,
advertisements, Got Mag with a little QR code. I love that.
that would be good, wouldn't it?
That would
That
be
would be
great.
good.
That'd be
See what I
perfect.
mean? I would like to collaborate with somebody in your generation who wants to do that.
Well, I would love to try somehow, some way. So maybe we could talk about maybe collaborate on something like that in the future.
Okay.
One
Good
of the
here.
fun, yes, and I think I know your answer, and I'm going to ask anyways, because I think me and you have the same, we're going to have the same answer on this question, but I like to ask it. So if you were on stranded or you're going to a deserted island, and you could bring one health related device, be a supplement, gadget, what have you, what would you bring with you and why?
Ooh, one gadget. Gadget.
Or supplement or whatever. There's
All right.
several, there's no
I
right or
would
wrong
take
answer.
my magnesium cream. And I would take that because I would be able to daily make sure I had enough magnesium in my system. And if I got a cramp or if I got a sore or I got strained in some way, I would know I was able to put a localized magnesium to that, be as healthy as
I love it. I knew you're,
I would assume that on a stranded island, I was going to have access to high magnesium water. Because if I had
ooh,
high magnesium water and my transdermal, I would feel safe.
perfect. I love that answer. I thought I knew you were going to say magnesium, but the twist was you said the magnesium cream,
Yeah.
which I love. And I always say like if I would take magnesium with me, of course, you're going to get vitamin D from the sun. You're going to have probably some local nutrition, maybe some coconuts or whatever have you for everything
Right.
else. But I love the answer to that because there's no right or wrong and everyone has such a unique response. And I like your response, magnesium from the water and the cream.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Dr. Rosanoff,
It's
this
a
is
traditional diet. Remember, we said before, I'd be on the paleo diet,
right.
which would be high in magnesium, but I would need that cream for aches and pains and injury.
Ah, I love it. I love it. Another application for magnesium. Well,
Mhm.
Dr. Rosanoff, I think we need to do this again because this was so insightful and there's so much more questions I have, so much more to cover on magnesium. But if there was any question I missed or anything you would want to just say in conclusion, is there anything that you would want to say at this point?
I have really enjoyed this today, and I love your knowledge of magnesium and I love your dedication to it. It's rare, I have found in practitioners, health practitioners, and I am delighted. And I want to congratulate you on it
Thank
and
you.
your effort to take this knowledge out to the world, which is so necessary. And I just want to say thank you.
This is my pleasure. And thank you so much for your work in magnesium research. And like you said, I was so delighted when you emailed me back and we got in touch for an interview similar to what happened with you and Dr. Sealing
Yes.
several years ago. So it's very cool to come full circle with a researcher that you hold in high regard. So thank you so much for coming on today. I really appreciate it. Everyone listening, please, take a look at some of Dr. Rosanoff's work on PubMed. You can just Google magnesium with her name. You can look at the Center for Magnesium Education and Research, make a donation if you so choose. And we'll see everyone on the next one. Please share this episode with a friend so we can share more magnesium awareness with everybody. Dr. Rosanoff, thank you for coming on.
Absolutely.
Thanks for listening to
everybody.
the Fredrickson Health Show. This podcast is for educational purposes only and not intended to be used as personalized medical advice. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss a single episode. While you're at it, leave us a rating and review. Follow us on social media and subscribe to our email newsletter for more information.